All right, you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and make Patrick the co-host now, and he should be jumping on here any minute. There he is. Looks like he's jumping in right now. So, hey, Patrick, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? I'm good. Just getting
Good,
my computer set up here. I think we're good.
good, good. Yeah, awesome. That sounds good. Yeah, you can go ahead and rock and roll and take it from here. I know that you got a lot of experience in kind of the off-grid systems and whatnot. So, really excited to hear what you have to say with all that. And where are you tuning in? Where are you tuning in from today?
I'm in our office in Panama City. I was going to face the other way so you could see the Bay of Panama here, but it was so bright that I just looked like a silhouette. So I thought I better put the background differently.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, we got quite a nice spot here in Panama.
that's awesome. Awesome. Well, glad to hear it. We got a little bit of sunshine up here, but probably not nearly as warm. So, but I'll let you take it away from here, and I'll see you on the back end of it.
Sounds good. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm going to do kind of just a high level little presentation on solar systems, wind systems, the pieces that are involved, and really not that much detail. Always happy to answer questions if people have them, and don't really have the time to go into it in depth, but I think it's really kind of an interesting thing and worth getting into. So who are we? We're EcoVillages. It's an often used term, but that's actually the name of our company. And we have what's called the FIRST certification. So it stands FIRST is FIRST. It stands for freedom, independence, resiliency, sustainability, and transparency. And it's kind of the philosophy that we have around all the communities that we're creating. We're in the midst of initiating a new one here, or two of them actually, in Panama, the country of Panama, and in Central America. And we've done a number of communities in Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, El Salvador, and expanding outside to Mexico, Costa Rica, Argentina. So we create these communities, and a lot of them, well, at least a lot of the homes within the communities are off grid or grid tied homes. All of our homes in every community comes with some form of solar system along with it. So been doing this for quite a while. Uh, aging myself here, but I started in the early 90s, I guess, with solar systems. They've come such a long way since then. And my son and I lived on a sailboat, and Zach and Jason have heard the story a few times, but that's kind of where we kind of honed the skills of creating our own power, desalinating our water, catching our own food or growing our own food and that sort of thing. So we really got into that kind of sustainability aspect and really liked the fact that we weren't reliant on, you know, government power systems or grocery stores and those sorts of things. So we really got into this and then wanted to kind of take it to the land off of the boat. And what better place than near the equator where we generate so much solar power down here that it makes the systems a lot easier. I'm Canadian. Originally lived most of my life in Vancouver Island. Much like in Zach and Jason's region there, you get a fair amount of the year is pretty cloudy. So the solar systems need to be quite a bit larger. And we learned a lot about systems up there and kind of took that down to this part of the world. So what I've discovered over the last 30 years of doing these systems is that there's really two main aspects to it. Yes, you got to produce your own power, or you want to produce your own power. You want to be independent from the power systems, but you also have to use smart kind of power conservation. And that's maybe more important than the amount of production of power. And if you don't do both of those pieces, it's just, likely not going to be extremely successful. And it doesn't have, like, we build luxury homes, right? We're not, we build a lot of tiny homes, but we also build some mid-sized homes, some big mansions, condominium buildings, all sorts of things in our communities throughout Latin America. And they're not like living in a yurt, right? And they're really nice homes with big screen TVs, multiple fridges and freezers and air conditioning and all those sorts of things. But you have to do that smartly because a lot of those things use a lot of power. So this is really like the solar systems for dummies. I think in the old yellow and black books, or the 101 version of solar systems. So again, for a lot of you out there probably know a lot about these systems, and you might find this kind of very simple for you, but I think for a lot of people, it's good to kind of get to know them a little bit if they're not familiar with solar systems or wind powered systems. And really, if you boil it down to, there's kind of three components to it. You have to produce your own power, which is, generally solar panels, wind turbines. There's lots of other ways, water, hydro generators and things like that. But the most common these days is really the kind of the solar and to some extent the wind power. And then unless you want to just produce power during the day and not at night, although wind can do that at night as well, obviously, but you're probably going to want some battery storage to store the power and be able to use it throughout the night as well. And then you need the inverter charger, which is the component that takes solar energy, wind energy, and not only charge the batteries, but converts it into regular AC power, whether you're in Europe or in Australia or in North America. You have a little bit different types of AC voltage systems, but all in all, it converts it to AC power from DC power, and makes it so that you don't really know inside your home, your tiny house, you don't necessarily know there's any difference between the type of power you've got. So this is a little bit more of a complicated diagram. I just scraped this off the web to kind of give you the different pieces, but here on the top left, you have the solar panels. On the bottom left, you have the wind turbines. You can have both. You can have either or, whatever you want to do. I put the grid power here in the middle too. So this would be a grid tie, or I can talk a little bit about hybrid systems as well. But for the most part, I kind of like being completely independent of any grid. So we try to do as many off-grid systems as possible. And these days, their inverter charger, the big orange thing in the middle there, is typically combined into one unit. You can still get charge controllers that are separate, inverters that are separate, but most of the systems right now are pretty sophisticated and work best if it's in one unit. And really what that does is it takes your solar panel power or your wind power, and it charges the batteries smartly, right? Doesn't overcharge them, tries to keep them at a certain floating charge once it reaches their charge. And it also produces power, converts the power from DC to AC so that you have regular outlets in your tiny home, and you can plug in your toaster or whatever, right? And as far as it's concerned, you're on the grid, even if you're not. And so those are really your components. At a simplest level, there's little bits and pieces that you kind of need in there to make sure it's all protected properly and it works properly. But I just threw an example. Everybody's always asking me, well, how much solar power, how many panels do I need? What size of battery? What size of inverter? There's really no right answer or wrong answer. Well, I guess there's lots of wrong answers to that, but there's not too many right answers. And basically, the little example I give here on the bottom is something that we put into a lot of our tiny homes that are maybe in the 400 or 500 square foot range, and or 40, 50 square meter range. And the 5 kilowatt battery, it depends on where you are, and I'll explain why that is so important. Obviously down here we're doing a lot of air conditioning, and that's one of our biggest draws. But this little system here is not really expensive, and if you're smart about it, you can run your system all the time. So, throughout the night. One of the things that I want to mention is heating and cooling is your enemy. That is where you're going to spend the most power by far. And if the more you can get away from doing that, the better. The more you can use things like gas stoves, gas water heaters, LED lighting, those sorts of things. Conserve power wherever possible. Use like an electric stove, electric clothes dryer is it's almost a dead short. That's how they create, in electrician terms, that's how you create the heat. Right? You're using enormous amounts of power. And every time you use enormous amounts of power, you have to produce enormous amounts of power. So it's very correlated, and the smarter you are, the better. The usage is extremely important, and just being smart about it too. Like I, spend a little time. We have a welcome center at our Veritas Village community here in Panama, and it's completely off grid and has multiple freezers and fridges and air conditioning and everything. And what I'm so used to staying there, overnight for a while and come back to the city and go back. And I don't think of it, never have any problems with power. But we had some other folks there the other day, and they'd open the freezer and stare at it for a while, or open the fridge and walk away from it while they were making breakfast and leaving the fridge door open. And to me, it was just like, how can you do that? Don't you realize the amount of power you let all the cold air out of the fridge? And now the fridge has to work hard to replace all that, cold air with the hot air that you let in. So especially in this climate where it's, 34 degrees Celsius, like in the 90s Fahrenheit, and we're always considering the heating and cooling thing. So, we use gas water heaters, we use gas stoves, we use those sorts of things, because that takes an enormous draw off the system, and that saves you a lot of money because, gas is generally cheap, and you can size your solar system much smaller if you don't, abuse it. And especially if you're off grid, you're sizing it for the peaks, right? You have a big party and, big sound systems and things like that, they use a lot of power. You don't want the power to go out, at midnight on New Year's Eve or whatever. So, you're sizing to the kind of the maximum draw that you're going to use. So you got to try to make that maximum draw as small as possible. There's kind of a second tier to it as well. Like, these are a little bit more finicky items that I would say, yeah, you can get away with a lot of this stuff. But if you want to be really conserving power and allow you to make a much smaller system, which is much less expensive, you can do things like use a French press instead of a standard coffee maker. A lot of people don't realize that a coffee maker, it takes maybe 1,200, 1,500 watts of power. That's a lot. That's like having a blow dryer plugged in all the time. Those are heating elements, right? They're terrible at drawing power. I know our coffee maker at the Welcome Center I was just talking about takes the same amount of power as our pool pump, which, a pump motor is also another big draw. So you get your heating and cooling and motors. Those are the kind of things that whenever possible, you try to stay away from them. You can use microwaves, for instance, really easily for reheating, because you typically put something in for a couple minutes and that's no big deal. But if you're going to start cooking in there for half an hour, that takes a lot of power. And then, things like toaster ovens are terrible because they're just like an electric element. But a pop-up toaster, it's like, okay, your toast takes 2 minutes to make, and then it's off. So you just got to think about what the draws are. And that, like I said, that's every bit as important as what the power you're producing. So when somebody asks me, like, what size of system am I going to need? It's like, how smart are you? How much can you conserve power and use common sense? Because you can get away with a very little system if you know how to make use of it. And as I mentioned here, like, leaving fridge doors open, people don't often realize that curling irons, hair dryers, those sorts of things, even if you're not on a solar system and you just want a lower power bill, it's a great idea to think about those things. If you curl your hair and then just put the curling iron down and walk away from it and let it turn off on its own automatic off, then you've probably used thousands of watts of power. And your power bill, if you're on a regular power grid system, you're paying for that. Other smart, things that you can do, and again, using common sense, like we all know that heat rises, right? Well, cold sinks. So when you have a freezer that's a chest style freezer with the top opens up like that, then you have the most efficient freezer, typically. They're well insulated too, because when you open it, all that cold air doesn't escape. We did a little bit of consulting for a restaurant that wanted to lower their power bill, and they had these big open door, like slide open door freezers. And every time they opened the door to grab, anything out of the freezer, a pail of ice cream or something, it let out all the cold air in the freezer, and the freezer had to work like crazy to get it cold again. All we did is switch those freezers to more efficient chest style freezers, and their power bill went down by like 75%. Because the chest freezer, you open it up, you grab out of there, most of the cold air stays in there, and then you close it again. And people don't think about those things until you're trying to conserve your own power. If you're lucky enough to be designing your own home right now, your tiny home, we do a lot of those designs, and we try to think of all these things along the way. For instance, clear story windows. If you're not familiar with those are kind of like at the top of, the top of the wall where the wall kind of meets the ceiling there, if you have openable windows at that height, like I said earlier, the hot air rises, you'll let the hot air out. And you can do some really smart things too with air vents on the bottom floor, like if you have a concrete bottom, or even just letting air from the bottom, which is cooler, up, excuse me, the clear story windows, as you open them, that creates a vacuum in the house and it has to suck that air in from somewhere. So if you're lucky enough to do some kind of geothermal thing, that's even better. But depending on your climate, like I mentioned earlier, you may be, here in the tropics, we're always trying to cool the place. We're not trying to heat it. We never heat it because it's always warm, even at night. So, but if you're in, Seattle or Detroit or something, and you need to heat, again, I'd go back to try to do as much of that with another fuel source like gas whenever possible. Like you can get kerosene, diesel efficient heaters. They're not maybe the most eco-friendly thing in the world. There's a lot of other ways that you can heat too, with solar mirroring and stuff like that. But keep in mind that heat, anytime you're using an electric element, try to stay away from that as much as possible. And so, creating your own power and making your own self-sustaining tiny home is an empowering and freeing thing. We create, like I said, freedom-oriented communities. And one of the things I love about it is, I have a home here in Panama City, and then we have a home at Veritas Village, which is our freedom-oriented community. When I go there, I love it because I know that regardless of what I'm doing there, it's not really costing me anything. We grow our own food. I have the power generated by solar and wind. So, I can go swimming in the pool there, and the pool pump's running on solar and everything. We have our own water well there. The water well is pumped with a solar system into tanks and then gravity fed to the homes. So it's really almost free to live there. And to me, that, you have financial freedom from these things too. And if you're smart about it, you can buy these systems now. And like with the lithium batteries and everything, they're so much better than the old, golf cart kind of 6-volt battery systems that we used to use. They last so much longer. They just produce so much more power. And the solar systems are getting better every day. In fact, a lot of people ask me like, well, if I wait a year, I'll probably get even a better price on solar systems. And that is true, but how much have you spent in that year not having a solar system, right? On power or just, getting the benefits of it. It's kind of like buying a laptop, or a cell phone, right? If you wait for the next version, it'll probably be, cooler, more powerful, has some other features. But, what have you lost in terms of efficiency or time with not having that phone this year? Right. So it's the same sort of thing. At some point, you got to kind of bite the bullet and say, okay. And right now, it's a good time. The systems, like I said, are so much better than they used to be. So if you're interested in some of the home designs we do and the communities we have, you can check us out at ecovillages.life. We do a lot of these kind of systems, and always happy to answer people's questions. We can't always size your system for you because we don't really know, what your circumstances are, but we can give you some ideas of the kind of systems that we put in. And again, if you can take out those major draws, those major loads on the system, you can downsize the system a lot and really get an inexpensive system to start. And most of the systems, if you buy them smartly and you get this right equipment, they're all expandable. So you can go, okay, well, I made it till 4 a.m. with power and then my battery died. Well, you can look at, adding another battery, and, maybe need to, maybe you don't have to add a couple more solar panels and that sort of thing. So you can kind of expand as you go with the systems, as long as you get an inverter that is capable of handling, a little bit larger system, then you're good. And that's probably the most important piece in the heart of the system. So that's really all I had for now. And again, I wanted to make sure that Zach and Jason and everybody stayed on time. So I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. And that's my presentation, and I appreciate everybody being on. So we had a good crowd in here, and hope even at that level, at the 30,000 foot level, you learned a little bit. And if not, and you have some more specific questions, we're always happy to help out. So with that, I will turn it back over to the guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Patrick. I mean, you definitely broke it down pretty easily to understand. It's cool to kind of see that. And that's crazy that just switching those freezers out at that restaurant saved 75% on their electric bill. That's pretty nuts. That's like, I mean, that's thousands of dollars, I'm sure, every single year for that
Yeah,
restaurant there.
exactly. And you know, it you can like that restaurant can now run on a solar system that isn't that large because of that, right? And you start thinking about the things that in that case they cook with natural gas, right? And so they didn't have that all that cooking to do with power. So we were trying to figure out where's all their big power draw coming from, and it turned out to be those massive side opening freezers.
That's so crazy. Yeah. And like just it goes to show like if you're efficient with all the different electrical, appliances that you use, you can actually get your electric usage down pretty far to where you're not actually needing a massive system. And kind of to your point, the smaller your electric draw is, the smaller the system is, which means the cheaper it is for you to achieve what you're trying to do. So,
Yeah,
which
for me, it's become kind of a game, right? I mean, most of the systems now have communications with an app that you can basically watch exactly what's going on in the system, and I think it drives my wife crazy because it's like, what did you just turn on? We spiked up 1500 watts, right? So sorry, I was curling my hair.
yeah, that's funny. Yeah, just like kind of constantly watching and whatnot. And yeah, definitely, obviously, location and weather dependent. That does make a big difference. But if you're in a relatively neutral climate where it doesn't get too crazy hot or too crazy cold, you can achieve a pretty actually efficient system and whatnot. But what are your best suggestions for non-electric heating and whatnot?
Well, like I said, there's lots of natural gas, propane type heaters out there, uh, especially for a tiny home or a tiny home on wheels. In the boating industry, where we were, a lot of the boats, because they're diesel powered, they have we had a sailboat, but usually to get offshore, you're getting out of the marina basically using your diesel engine. So they often come with a diesel heater in them. They're not the most, like I said, eco-friendly heaters that kind of smoke a bit, but they're extremely efficient. You barely use any diesel fuel to create heat. And there's kerosene heaters and out there, so it sort of depends on how you feel. I think I've told you a million times that we coined the term eco-sensible, right? And versus eco-fanatic. So even though our company's name is EcoVillages, we try to have common sense. So we can, when you can downsize your system a lot and save a lot of money and save on a lot of power by having a natural gas heating system, it goes, and it's also simple, right? Because you can contain so much energy in a bottle of natural gas or propane that it could go a long time, and so it makes it more convenient too, versus oh, I better wait till noon before I start heating the home because that's when the solar panels have enough power to do it, right? So and wood stoves, things like that, is probably the most natural way to do it. And I know Spencer, my son, has a basically a tiny home van, and he's used, he put a wood stove in there for heating, and that works great. So there's lots of options, and I've seen ones with kind of unfoldable mirror on the top and into a tube, and then they heat the water in the tube with solar power, kind of a passive solar heating system, and you could do the in-floor tubing, and there's lots of different options out there. But an element like baseboards, I wouldn't go with those. Baseboard heaters. So I don't know. Did we cut out for a bit?
I think we did. I think our internet just cut out for some reason, but sorry about that. But yeah, you're saying there's a lot of different options, and being eco-sensible and everything, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, like, there's no point to oversize if you're not needing it, especially if you can kind of be a little more efficient with it. And that's the nice part about a tiny house, is that it's pretty quick and easy to efficiently heat the whole space. And so, like in a normal or or like a larger house, you kind of have to try to maintain the temperature all the time because it doesn't make sense to like let it cool off and then heat it up and then cool off and heat up when you're gone for half the day or whatever at work. Doesn't make sense to let your house cool off because it just takes too much energy to heat it back up, or vice versa if it's in the summertime or whatnot. Whereas like a tiny house, you can pretty effectively cool it off or heat it up pretty efficiently and fast. And so sometimes it's easier and better to just let it, let the temperature change. And then when you get back home to either cool it off or heat it up at that point. So a lot of different.
And you can even take that to the next level. We've done some fun stuff in the past where, for instance, we have a 4-post canopy bed and close the curtains, and the air conditioner was just on the headboard above you, and all your cooling is the 30 square feet basically around, that's you in the bed, right?
Yep.
And if you get up to go to the washroom at night or whatever, you get into the heat or the cool, depending, but you're very comfortable within the bed, and it saves an enormous amount of power when you're not heating or cooling the whole room. You're just heating or cooling the space that you're actually taking up. And we've done some other interesting stuff, like a refrigerator throws off a lot of heat, right? There's a hot side to it in order to create the cool side. You can actually tack on a water tank to that and take advantage of that, because water is pretty efficient at exchanging heat, and use that as your, for hot water showers and stuff like that. So you're making use of that heat without having that heat go into the room too. So there's a lot of different things you can get really creative with, which makes it kind of fun too.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I haven't thought about that, doing hot water on the back of a fridge. That's pretty cool. It's a unique way to solve that issue because, yeah, I mean, people don't realize it, but not only, like you're saying, when you open up the fridge door and it's a hot summer day, you just let all the cold air out and then you put all the hot air in, and now the fridge has to work on double time to try to replace that cold air again. But when it's doing that, it's also kicking on the heater on the backside, basically the element exchange there, and so it's heating up the room even more. So
exactly, yeah. There's always the two sides to the cooling, like the same with the air conditioner, right? So you get the hot air coming out of the air conditioner. If you have something to heat, it's might as well take advantage of that too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Awesome, Patrick. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on here and share your wealth of knowledge there and everything, kind of off-grid solar systems and so on. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the time. And yeah, if you guys want to hear more of what Patrick's got going on, and definitely check out his very cool luxury and yet affordable small homes and communities and whatnot that they're doing, go check out EcoVillages, and they're doing some really cool stuff. And yeah, we can't wait to get down there to visit you guys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here, hopefully this year. So that'll be great. And thanks again. It's always great to be on part of one of your events, and hope we can continue to contribute a bit in the future.
Absolutely. Well, sounds good, Patrick. And we're gonna welcome on the next presenter there. So thank you so much, Patrick, and we'll be in touch.
All right, take care.
See ya.